All right, we are live. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in, and for those tuning in after the fact as well. As you know, I am Joseph MoJOE McCarthy, host of the Modern Day Alchemist, and this week I am thrilled that I get to bring HOWARD FALCO back into the fold here. We did have him on some shows back in the early days on Fireside, and then life does what life does. And here we are, though, back with HOWARD in his office. And I'm so excited to share HOWARD with my audience and also to hear what HOWARD's up to. So, HOWARD, for those who have never met you, don't have any frame of reference, how would you just, what's a quick introduction you can help people understand who you are?
I'm a spiritual teacher on the power of self-awareness and self-understanding. And I'm also a mental performance and strength coach to top college and professional players in the world. In all sports. This work on self-awareness goes to the heart of who we are and how we break through to new levels of experience, whether we want to conquer the world or whether we just want to experience daily peace. And so that's really what I do. And then I've authored 2 books on this power of self-awareness and currently in the process of writing a 3rd right now.
All right. So tell people about your first 2 books and then do the big unveiling of your 3rd one.
Yeah. So the first one is going to go the right way here. I Am, right. The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. And that book is a deep look into self-understanding and self-awareness from energy and matter through the psychology, all the way through the spirituality of who we are and how we look at who we are, how that impacts what unfolds for us, and then how we connect to life around us and how life connects back to us in terms of how creation unfolds. So some deep and powerful work on self-understanding. The second book is Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life. And that is how time works its way into your life. So how by the way that you think and feel and understand the nature of who you are and your connection, you can either work to expand time to where it takes longer to get to the state of experience that you're looking for, or by raising up your consciousness and your self-awareness, you can begin to collapse time and have the conditions come together for what you're looking to experience a lot sooner in the experience of time.
So a little light reading for, when you're in the yeah, it's kind of like a joke book, I guess, right? Is that what you're saying?
Oh my God, so funny. So funny. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Tell us about your book, Howard.
So the 3rd one, it's been 10 years, but these books are still relevant, very relevant today, and hopefully will be for years to come. The 3rd book, I decided to take 20 years of working with people and going through things you probably have experienced or know about and things you can't imagine, that have overcome trauma, relationship breakups, spiritual crisis, and athletes at the top level in the world who have achieved championships and next level performance through this work. And I'm taking those 20 years and all the teachings I've done, and I'm putting it in a step-by-step guidebook for self-mastery, what I call next level mindfulness, and the path to inevitable success. So that's actually the subtitle of the book. And the title is Invincible.
Woo! Yeah. Love that.
Because I believe with this awareness, there isn't anything that you can't overcome, get through, understand, and achieve a higher state of mind as you go through it. And I want to give that out.
When did I Am come out, Howard? When did you first?
I Am was published in 2010, and Time in a Bottle was published in 2014. Invincible will be published in 2024.
All right,
I can't believe it's been 10
years. You're in the middle of writing that now, is that correct?
Right in the heart of it right now, in the center of the book right now. I just finished a writing session, actually. So yeah, it's coming out onto the paper right now, and I'm really excited about what's coming out and to be able to deliver this out there.
Yeah. So as you probably know, Howard, Graciela Moore on Wisdom read your book live.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Sessions, and you actually tuned in several times as the author, which was fabulous. So I experienced I Am a couple different ways. One was through Graciela sharing it and reading it on Wisdom, and then through the discussions that you and I and Kristen and Dee Grant have had in the past. And you probably won't know this, but I've quoted you, I don't know, a zillion times, sometimes word for word and sometimes just what I have learned from listening to you. But one of the most powerful things for me so far, and I know this is going to be one of many, because I admire you, Howard, as a person, but I love the fact that you're doing the work that's required to take this knowledge and experience and then to put it down into paper, because that's That's no easy thing. You know, people often talk about manifestation. If you just say it enough and you believe it enough, then it's going to show up in real space. But that's not exactly true. It can get go in that direction, but if you don't take the steps, you don't get from the bottom of the stairs to the top by saying, "Oh, the top stair looks really nice from down here." Right? You got to climb.
Right.
And so you've done the climb, and so kudos to you, and thank you for the gifts that you are manifesting into the world through your hard work. And how it's affected me personally is I had a very limited understanding of what ego is and how does that work. And as you know, ego generally, when it comes up in conversation, it gets bashed as our enemy, as the thing that's holding us back and getting us in trouble all the time. And so that was my conditioning, that was my understanding. But there was something about that I thought, well, as a person of faith, I think God created us with an ego for a reason. So there's got to be another side to this story. And I just didn't know what it was. And you helped me understand that the ego can actually be your ally, right? Because all the ego is really doing, and this is my interpretation of your words, so please clarify if I go astray from what you intended. But my understanding of what you're teaching, which is really helpful to me, is that my ego's design isn't to be my friend or my enemy. It's just to prove my belief system as right, whether or not it's true. So to take the Henry Ford quote, if I believe I can or I believe I can't, I'm right. Why? Because my ego will prove me right, right? And so this is my interpretation of what you've said, and that if I can open up my heart to the possibilities that I have kind of shut off, then really the only enemy that my ego is my pride that isn't open to new possibilities, that I think I'm right and I have to be right and the smartest person in the room. Then it's the pride that really gets me into trouble. And so it's my proposal. This is where I've taken what you've taught me and taken it to another level. My proposal is, with practices of gratitude and grace, if I can give and receive gratitude and grace on a regular basis, I condition my ego to move from the pride side to humility that says, I don't have to be the smartest person. I don't know everything. In fact, I only know a little teeny bit. So then I get to this place like, well, what else? And what if? And I start opening up myself to new possibilities, which I think parallels your journey in some ways. And again, please clarify. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just saying how it's affected my life. So thank you for your gift.
First of all, thank you so much for your words, Mojo. I have no words back other than thank you. I am truly grateful for you telling me that, for how it's affected you, for your support, and for your words. As far as the ego goes, yes, when this came onto me, what I realized was that the ego is designed to validate our existence. And when the way that we think we should be is threatened, the ego is going to go into protection mode in order to validate that what it believes is true. Now, the question is, the reason I explain the ego this way is because this way it can be looked at as a tool rather than an enemy that needs to be destroyed. And you can't destroy an ego. The Dalai Lama has an ego. He says yes or no to speaking events or what he wants to eat, or not what he wears, because that's really taken care of through Buddhism, which makes it really easy on the ego, right? Because you don't have to worry about identity. But there are certain things he will say yes or no to, and that's his ego saying, this is who I am. This is not who I am. Right. And so that's, to me, what the ego is. It's a bridge between what we believe is true and reality. But what it's a great tool for is to see what you believe, to see, because once the ego gets engaged and gets riled up, you can see, what is the ego trying to protect? Why do I have to prove myself in this room of people?
Right.
And it's because the ego's idea of I am smart is being threatened by an underlying lie that's saying you're not smart. And the ego's trying its best to battle it, or I'm not important, so I need to, I don't know, put my name on everything, to show how important I am, or whatever it is that on the biggest stage or the little stage that people are doing. But the ego is designed to validate your existence. Now, sometimes it's really mundane, like I'm hungry, so I'm going to take energy to go in the car, drive to the store, and get groceries. That's the ego validating that I have food and I'm fed. But sometimes when someone says, what you're wearing looks goofy, and you're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? What do you know about fashion? Who do you think you are? That's the ego protecting that a piece of you is now threatened, that I know what I'm doing. So it's really this great tool to be able to see what you believe is true and where it's flaring up. The most grounded, peaceful people who are in the flow of life, they say they don't have an ego really. That's because their ego doesn't have a lot of work to do other than daily tasks of staying alive. It's not in this fight or flight protection mode.
Right.
People with fragile egos are revealing that inside there's a lot of conflict in what they believe about themselves. So the ego in turn has a lot of work to do constantly, all day. Oh no, proving
exhausting.
themselves, exhausting. So it's a tool. So looking at it this way, it becomes a tool to help you gain more self-awareness.
Absolutely. That's so good. And again, I proposed this recently in my own stuff, that words don't mean anything until we put the meaning into it, right? We interpret the sound that I'm making in my mouth right now, comes to your ears, and then you assign meaning to it. Here's what the words are. Here's what I feel about them. Here's what I think. And it may or may not be what I intended, right? It's just the way you interpret it. So this is where this idea of whether the ego is my ally or a tool or really working against me is when I start interpreting your words as fighting words, right? Rather than they're just your words. And any feeling that I have, right? Whatever gets riled up, as you said, in my ego, that's not because of what you said. That's because of what I feel about what you said. That's because of my interpretation of what you said.
It's your need to have me be aligned with your value.
Yes, right. Exactly. Which causes all sorts of trouble in the world, as we see every day in social media, in the news, wars and rumors of wars, as to use biblical language, right?
Yeah.
So Howard, I know enough about you to know this isn't just a great theory that you came up with because you're an academic and you've studied these things and you thought, oh, I'm just going to come up with a proposal. This comes from your own journey, your own experience, your own life, and how it has flowed. And to me, that's incredibly powerful, because you're talking about what has happened in you. And now, as an author and a speaker and a coach, you are saying, this is so profoundly life transforming and has been to me and my life and my family. I'm talking in you for Howard, that I want to turn around and share this with others so that they can benefit.
Exactly.
So give us a little bit of your journey, and how did you get to this point where now you're authoring a third book and you're coaching championship level players, and you're understanding how the ego can actually serve you in many different ways. How did you get here?
A couple things. First of all, I'll say that I'm a 20-year overnight success.
Excellent.
So I've been grinding and working very hard to bushwhack and carve a path with this work out there.
Yeah.
Practicing exactly what I preach, believing it, having being armed up with what I needed to prove it, and go out there and knock on doors and be vulnerable. And that includes when I finished the manuscript and having to present it and having to be extremely vulnerable with that, because that was one of the more frightening moments in my life, was handing that to an editor.
On the first book,
on the first book, to be ripped to shreds, because I knew I was gonna get tested on that. But I want to go back to something you said, because it's really important. I'm not an academic. And I think it's really important to hear that, because one of the most exciting things out of this work and what happened to me was it reveals that any human being is worthy of revelation, universal insight, what people in religion would call the Holy Spirit. Anybody on this planet is worthy of receiving that. And that's one of the big messages in the work, is that when you've worked yourself into a state of humility and presence to such a degree that your cup is open, it gets poured into. And that's a big thing I want the audience to really know and understand. But my journey, and just to give you the real short story, then you can go into any part of this you want, but basically, huge curiosity as a child. First in the time I ever saw the moonless sky on a camping trip, and I saw the stars that were in the sky. Literally, the breath was sucked out of my lungs, not in, out. It was such an exhale of awe and wonder at what was the canopy that was above me. I'd never seen anything like that in Chicago by the city lights.
Great.
And I was just like, okay.
How old were you?
There has to be 14.
14. Okay.
There has to be more to understand about all this than what we know.
Yeah.
And so it generated thousands of questions that permeated the back of my mind as I went through a normal life. Parents got divorced in my teens, left home from Chicago on my own to go put myself through school out west at Arizona State. Just fell in love, got married, went through the whole machinations that we all go through trying to find happiness and peace.
Yeah.
And fell in love, got married, had kids, got my job, bought our first home. No peace yet. Kind of got nervous about that. A lot of these things were checked off this big list. These were some big things. Was happy, would love my children, my family, but where's the ultimate sense of peace? Well, that wasn't there because these deep questions, this guttural yearning that not everybody has, by the way, in terms of that want, was not satiated. Thought the last thing on the checklist was money because I was working in the finance business, working with a bunch of people that had more money than they'd ever spent in their lifetime. They weren't happy people. When that hit me, I was like, shit, I'm out. I don't know what the answer is now, because if it's not that, I don't have anything left on the list to check off. What is it? And that was the knee-bending moment. That was the raise my hands up to the universe, to God, to life, and say, I am ready to understand and to know. And that was the beginning of the moment where information started to meet me on my everyday path. And it started in a seminar, I read a book on the psychology of trading markets. And I was fascinated by the way this guy wrote the book. And I went to his seminar. There were 20 people in Scottsdale. And he said one thing, and it kind of domino fell in my mind. And I'll tell you what the one thing was. He said was, because I was regretting, well, these trades, I made all these mistakes and I shouldn't have bought that. And I could have done that. And he said, he looked at me, he goes, well, Howard, he goes, if you could have done better, you would have. I was like, what? No, you don't understand. I made a mistake. He's like, no, if you could have done better, you would have. And all of a sudden, my ego just froze because it had no answer to that. None. And all I was left with was the perfection of my choices. And that broke me into a crazy state. And then I had somehow had the wherewithal coming out of this day 2 of the seminar, where I was just in this glow of realizing I've been chasing this idea of perfection in myself my whole life. And there it was, right, in the unfolding of each moment. And then I thought, holy cow, I asked these questions 2 weeks ago. This is the universe answering me. And it hit me that this is what life is doing every moment for us. Right. This is the love right here, right now.
Yes.
Just using us as vestibules, right? But it's like, wow, that's how unconditionally loved I am, that it's coming to me in but I'm only going to hear it and see it when I'm ready. The universe is always, or God's always giving it to us, but it's only when we're ready. Yeah. And that mojo blew me away. And that started me walking into each day going, where's my answer coming from today? And I was so present that time started to collapse between question and answer until I had this moment of simultaneous awareness that produced I am. And I, after a couple months of silence, trying to embrace the disbelief at what had happened, I decided to write I am and begin to give back, and left my job. And here we are 20 years later. So,
yeah, that's brilliant. And so I'm going to pull a couple things out of what you said that really nailed me, and that I agree with wholeheartedly. And one is that this isn't just for the elite, for the intellectual, for the gifted, for the anything. You fill in the blank however you wish, right? That the universal nature of the creator, this is my interpretation, right?
Sure.
The nature of the creator, it really is unconditional love. And I think people use that word, but they don't really think about what they're saying, because unconditional means there are no conditions. It means one of two things, and I could interpret it either way. There are no conditions, or whatever conditions there might have been met. And, my faith fills in those blanks both directions. But also you talk a lot about, both in this conversation and when I've heard you talk before, that this revelation, use the word revelation. And I love that word, because what I'm experiencing now at age 57, having grown up in a very specific faith tradition that had a lot of parameters around what's acceptable to believe and what's not. I'm finding now at 57 that it was a very small container for a very large God, right? That it's like trying to take the infinite and sticking it into finite something.
It can't
fit,
be done. Yeah,
right?
no.
Or C.S. Lewis once said, Jesus himself, that's like taking Andre the Giant and trying to put him in a child-sized wetsuit. How did that ever work? How did you get God in a human form? And I just love that idea that if I can describe God, source, universe with my own words and my own mind, then it's not a very big God, because I'm a limited, finite being. But I can tap into this infinite source, and you talk about this a lot. But so, to go back to this, my first observation is that this revelation, which is in every moment ongoing, not a one-time thing, is available to anybody who's seeking, knocking, asking, right? Looking.
Correct.
Who's searching. Yes. And it's actually in the searching where we suspend, I call this willful suspension of belief, right? And when we were kids, we grew up in school, and they say when you go to a movie and it's a sci-fi or it's a thriller or whatever, you have to have willful suspension of disbelief. Otherwise, you won't enjoy the movie, because you say, well, that could never happen in real life, right? So now I take that into my spiritual journey, and I say, I have to intentionally have a willful suspension of my beliefs, because my beliefs actually are very limiting to the possibilities. So by having a willful suspension of my beliefs, it doesn't say that I'm abandoning faith. It says, I think I'm only getting a little teeny piece of the puzzle. What else? What haven't I seen? And so that I'm asking those same questions that you are. And
perfect.
And I want people to hear that Howard didn't get a PhD. He didn't study under the great
sit
master.
With somebody in India, didn't go to theology school, just simply asked questions and opened my mind with wonder and awe to what could be revealed.
Yeah. And still doing that to this day. That's
absolutely. I have, it's a complete ongoing process. Unfortunately, about 6 months ago, I lost my mother. And that was the first experience with somebody. I mean, I don't think it gets any closer really, than your own mother. And for people that have gone through grief like this close, that, I'm sure you understand, it caused questions again.
Of course.
And I put myself in that same state of faith and trust in order to hear, what I needed to hear in terms of satiating those questions. And it brought great peace.
So based on the discussion we've had so far, from your position, is this the ego in play when I get a revelation of sorts? Maybe it's a small one, but suddenly I have this understanding I didn't have before. Some people call it an epiphany, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tend to see both in me and the people I hang out with, that when there's an epiphany, then we latch onto it, right? We grip onto it with all that we've got, because it's so transformative. Like it opened my mind to a new possibility, provided a way for me to understand the world I'm living in or the grief that I'm going through, right? But then my hypothesis is that it's so profound that we hang on to it really tightly, as if that is the answer. And so then I see so many people, including myself, that I can't release the fact that was the answer I needed in that moment. So it's my supposition. I want to get your take on this, Howard, that solutions are solutions for a momentary circumstance. They're not for a lifetime. And so we come up with an idea, a solution, or whatever, and it works in that moment. And then we think that has to be the way it has to work for the rest of our lives. And unfortunately, everything's changing. Everything's in flux. So that was a momentary solution, not a lifetime solution. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I totally understand it. Some epiphanies can be universal without time. Others can be determined by the one constant in the universe, which is change. And so you have to flow with that. So something that was true 2,000 years ago may not be true at all. And that's where discernment is so important, the ability to open your mind and have a really clear understanding and objective mindset about where we are now versus where we are then, and what makes sense in the flow of the dynamics of life. But some of them are grander enough to be outside of time, but beyond really a time change. They're more universal in their experience. The other thing I would say is when we get an epiphany, if we have to convince somebody else of it, it's not really a truth. Like my work, I'm putting it out there so it's in the discourse, and I'm excited about teaching it, but I don't need one single convert, not one.
Yeah.
I have no need for that. Zero. You know what I mean? I'm only interested in those that are interested in the way this material has unfolded to see if it helps them. And then the last thing I'll say on this is that truth to each individual is what works. And for me, when I know I've received truth is when I no longer have the question.
But couldn't this happen both ways? I'm going to ask you a question here, Howard. Some people they call it truth, but really it's their perception in the moment, their perspective. I'll talk about myself because I hate talking about other people. And who are those people anyway? I don't know.
Exactly.
So for me,
American people.
Right. All those people out there.
Yeah.
Everybody except for you and me. That's who I'm talking about. But so I often say I have a truth or a belief, which is a very strong word. But really, I find out later when more information comes along that it was way off. And even though I was passionate about it, and so I can either try to defend what I called my truth, or I can admit, well, that was just my perception. That was the information I had to date. What do you think?
Well, I think that because our ego fears the unknown, it can be hard sometimes for people to let go of things that they know are going to be hard to continue to keep up this idea that this is what truth is. And so, but they fight for it. They fight for it because without that, then what? Well, I don't know if I'll just take a real touchy one. If God isn't the way I see it and feel it, and for everybody else too, then what is God? Then I don't know. Then I'm lost because I had this idea and it was really personal to me. And now you're saying it's much bigger and my brain doesn't deal with that well. But yet I know it's right, but I can't, hold on to what, so it can be hard sometimes. That's why you never want to push truth on anybody, because they're having a hard time just going through their day, making sure their beliefs are real. But yeah, I think that's the reason is that people, they hold on to what's true as part of their existence. I like to define my existence by unveiling more truth. So that way I'm not guarding against it. So it's a kind of a cool way to set your identity so that your ego follows that. Oh, okay, we want to be a pioneer where we like the unknown. Let's go into that. Oh, we're not as fearful of it. So it's kind of a way I outsmarted my ego on it.
Yeah. My friend Steve Hayes talks about pioneers and settlers, right? The pioneers are the trailblazers they're going into the unknown. And some people are wired that way, but usually it's a small percentage of the population that are willing to go into the wilderness.
Correct. Very small.
Once the settlers know that it's safe and that whatever savages are out there have been subdued, then they may unsettle themselves from their dwellings and go and settle into the new spot. But really they're settlers. They're just settlers in a new area. But the trailblazers usually get bored pretty quickly and then they're off trailblazing in another direction. And that's by the way, for anybody who's listening, please understand that's not a judgment that one is better than the other.
No way.
That's not what I'm saying. I don't want that to be misinterpreted. Like if you're not a trailblazer, then you suck, and if you're a settler, vice versa. That's just to say that. Hi, Cecilia Grace. Thanks for joining in. You know Cecilia from Wisdom. She's
yeah.
Today. It's nice to have you here on the
Hi,
show,
Cecilia.
Yeah. So and this goes a whole nother direction about making judgments about who's better than the other, and that causes all sorts of problems. But I love this possibility that because we all have our own fingerprint, we have our own eye print, our own voice print, that our DNA is very individual. I see Ron Perry here. This is Noble Ron, also from the Wisdom Show. And he's making a joke. Thank you so much for that. Ron's always got a good sense of humor. And just to prove he was joking, here we go. Okay. So let's say, Howard, so this is as I observe, I'm trying to become the observer as much as I can in my life. I observe that every single human in the history that ever was or ever will be had an individual fingerprint, eye print, voice print, dentures, the DNA, all that kind of stuff. well, there's almost 8 billion people on the planet now, and who knows how many billions have died and how many will come. To me, that's a sign, right? There's an indication that we're not supposed to be the same. We have things in common, but it's this idea of oneness, not sameness. I think so much of our society is striving for sameness, but really what we want is oneness, where we work together, but we each have our own individual gifts, talents, abilities, expressions. Exactly.
Yeah. We have the free will to express who we want to be, while we respect the similarities and the oneness between us all in the common goal to express and to live and express ourselves. Now, the only place that it gets, I think, a little not complicated, but where it needs more commentary is if someone is expressing themselves in a way that manipulates, harms, or purposely tries to hurt another human being.
Right.
That kind of expression is not supported in a world or in a life where love and expression and connection is the common core goal of every soul. And the souls that think that that's not, there's some misunderstandings there that, and that's why there's suffering and a lot of negative energy surrounding that, because that's the way divinity is trying to nudge them more towards truth. I'll give you an analogy to that.
Yeah, great. Excellent.
Because I used it in I Am, and it's from The Wizard of Oz. Any time that the Wicked Witch showed up as a demonstration, the allegory of fear on the journey, right? You take the road and fear keeps showing up. You need courage, right? That's why she needed courage, is one of those things. But what was interesting is when Glinda showed up, the witch had no power. That's because Glinda represented the belief of positivity and love and goodness that always overcomes darkness or negativity. And so even in one part of the movie, she was trying to get at Dorothy, and Glinda was standing here, and she said, "Oh, be gone. You have no power here." In other words, in front of me. So you have no power here. Shoo away before a house falls on you, It was such an incredible example of, to me, the power of positivity and love and connection, and how it can overcome all fear. But yes, I think that we're all looking for that connection to oneness, while at the same time, we are creative beings with desires, which there's nothing wrong with, that are trying to express and experience.
Yes.
And in essence, if I can pop into religion for just a second and borrow something from it, in essence, by doing that with that free will to express ourselves, that is glorifying. That is the true nature of glorifying, because we're freely expressing who we are in a loving and kind way that doesn't impinge on anybody, doesn't manipulate anybody. That's glorifying.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, so many things resonate deep in my heart with what you're saying. One is, I have this growing sense that God, however you want to define God in your own mind and experience, is much more of an inviter than an obligator or a. So these are words that come to me, that God invites us into a relationship with Him, with nature, with each other, that is loving, that's positive, right? As you were talking about, but He doesn't force it to happen. It's an invitation, not an obligation, not an imposition. Religion often tweaks it so that it's not you get to, but you have to. And these are very simple words, but very powerful words. And I think of this even in terms of generosity. I can give to get, because the law of reciprocity is at work. When I sow, I reap. So I give and I'll get something back. But when my motivation is that I'm giving to get, it's not nearly as fulfilling or purposeful or meaningful as if I flip those words around and I get to give. Now it's a game. It's fun. I have more than I need. I'm blessed. I get to give to somebody, and maybe I can do it and they won't even know it was me. They don't have to pay me back. I can just sneak some joy, some love, some, and I get to give. And it's such a more beautiful expression and fulfilling. And I receive double. I receive when I give, because that's a gift in itself. And the privilege of giving to help somebody is very fulfilling. And then the blessings come back to me as well. So do you see what I'm talking about? This shift of, it's not an obligation. It's not an imposition. It's an invitation to a better way of living.
think one of the things as we go down the journey of life and we get older and wiser that we see that life is in a co-creative nurturing experience with us. What is it nurturing us? It's nurturing us into a greater awareness of who we are so that we have more ability and power to create. So yes, it is that invitation. That's what I like your words, an invitation, but it's an invitation to open to and to have faith in and connect with that which has sustained you and put you here in this place, and
Right.
to see what even more that's in you. You know, that's why the subtitle of the first book is The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. And to me, that's what divinity is trying is presenting to us every single moment of every day.
Yeah.
And it's just waiting for us to open more to that.
So you talked about
No obligation, by the way. Yeah.
you talked about the Wizard of Oz. I'm going to pull out of Harry Potter here. So Harry Potter, before he understands that there is this school and Hogwarts and all that kind of stuff, he's living a very mundane existence in a kind of depressed state. And the owls are flying around dropping invitations to Hogwarts. But if you notice in the movie, especially that first movie, Harry Potter receives tons of invitations, but he never opens them up. Right? They're laying on the desk, they're laying on the floor, the owls are flying around, and the owls aren't getting frustrated. They just keep throwing the invitations out until eventually, right? He opens it up and he's like, he's invited into an invisible world that's right around him. He just couldn't see it. Right. And I'm like, what a spiritual principle that is, right? That
Perfect.
the God who is love, again, I'm not forcing religion on anybody. I'm just saying you didn't create yourself. Somebody created you. And I think the one that created you loves you, but he's very graciously dropping invitations anywhere, everywhere, all the time. And we don't see them. We don't open them up. But when we do, suddenly an unseen world that was there all along shows up, and we get to experience, as you said, we get to experience a much more profound expression of who we are because we've been invited into and actually opened up the invitation and went into this unseen world. Now we can't unsee it. Now that we know it's there, we can't back out and say, no, there was no Hogwarts. We go, I can't tell everybody because they're going to think I'm an idiot. But I experienced a profound sense of something different, something amazing.
Yeah, but no, I think that's a great allegory for life and for how it works. You ask to the degree you want to know, to the degree you're looking to solve an issue or create something or change something, life is going to come back to you with the insight. Divinity is going to unfold, going to show you where there's the gaps, what's been missing, where there needs to be a shift and change, and then your free will is going to decide how much of that you want to take in and how you use time in terms of how fast you want to change.
So, Howard, can you pin this to an actual story in your life? You're going along, and then something happens. You were looking, you were seeking. It showed up. You weren't expecting it, and an epiphany, a real revelation, however you want to say it. Can you pin it to a story?
Well, I can just go back to the main story of how this all happened.
Okay.
You know, I was asking questions for years, but I wasn't ready to see the answer because I wasn't ready to give up the beliefs that I had that were telling my story to me and that I was holding on to.
Right. Yeah.
Until the point came where I couldn't take it any longer. You know, a lot of time people that, like they say, people that go through addiction have to get to rock bottom because it's when they'll finally let go of their last bit of pride about who they are in order to receive the wisdom that will heal them. So it's the same process for every one of us. So yeah, it was really that, and just being open. And once, like I said, once Pandora's box was open, once I realized that this is how it's working every day, and that's the type of unconditional loving connection, then really there was nothing to fight with or argue with or go against in life, because all of it was for my benefit and good.
Yes.
That doesn't, now I don't want that to be misinterpreted.
Right. And it can be.
It can be, right. If you're being manipulated or something like that, the benefit is for you to wake up to it and have enough self-respect to be able to state who you are in order to change that. So it's not about laying down and being a doormat to anything and just accepting everything. That's a big misinterpretation. But
Yeah. Glad you said that.
But everything is a lesson for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So this goes back to questions for me. When things happened in my life, I was molested by my own music minister when I was 11 years old. No, 14 years old, which for a kid who's full of faith and active in the church and all that. But because my family had fallen apart, I barely needed a father figure, and one swooped in, but he turned out to be a predator. So I was shaken, my psychology, my physiology, my spirituality is all shaken. And I don't like the fallout of what happened from that trauma. But fast forward 40 years, when I finally was able to start talking about it and digging into it and what happened and stand up for myself, as you said, advocate for myself, learn, is there any good out of this? Is there any good that I can take out of it? Because to me, for 40 years, it was mostly just suck, just pain and trauma and wounds. However, now, after I stood up for myself and advocated for myself and went to trial and all that kind of stuff, little by little, I learned so much about who I am and how I'm created and what's possible, and that the wounds didn't disappear, but now they no longer define me. As I like to say, my wounds became the roadmap that showed how much I've overcome. Right? I wouldn't have wished that upon my younger self. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. But the fact that I carried those through all those years, lived a productive life, didn't lose my faith in all of that, and then when I got to the place where I could actually address it, now it becomes almost a sense of a superpower that says, if that isn't going to kill me, I don't think anything is. Right? That's kind of where I am now.
Wow, what an incredibly powerful story. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I so appreciate who you are and who you've become as a result of it. So much respect to you for that. Well, I think you made a really powerful choice, which is whether or not you were going to let it at some point define you any longer. And you chose to liberate yourself from the experience, the way you were experiencing it that limited you, and instead see it in a way that expanded you.
Right. Yeah. And really, that's a perception shift. It didn't change any of the circumstances. Everything happened the way it happened. But now the way I see it and the way I interpret it,
Right.
it becomes, rather than limiting, it becomes fuel. Right. And that's such a powerful lesson. And until you experience it, sometimes it doesn't really all make that sense. You hear people like Tony Robbins say, if I can't, I must. Well, that's a really great statement, and it makes for a nice bumper sticker. But in real life, when I feel like I can't, my impulse isn't to say I can't, so I'm going to do it. But can I get to can I get to that place though, where I realize that the can't is really my limiting belief system that thinks I'm incapable. But can I push against that and say, is that really true? It feels true, but that doesn't mean it is true.
Right. I think that's the optimal question. Is it really true? And that's where self-reflection and the ability to look at that and go, you know what? That may have been my truth for a while and what I experienced, but that's not what the universe is about, and that's why I spent so much time in all the first two books and this third book, in the very first chapter, talking about the infinite nature of life, because in an infinite nature of life, can't doesn't exist. Right. And that's why that's the grounding basis of the two, and then this third book. So it's important in the way that it allowed you to reflect upon that and how you shifted it. But you're right, it can be very terse to say, if I can, I must. I mean, that's, like you said, a nice bumper sticker, but there needs to be more insight on that.
Yeah. Well, what I've come to realize is that Tony Robbins says that because he's worked through all his own stuff. So he says it because that's his story. But for the rest of us on the outside looking in, we're like, well, sure, easy for you to say. Right. So let's
or that's what worked for him.
That's what worked for him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have great respect for how he's helping people work through their own stuff. Let's talk about some of the success stories. So I know your third book is highlighting 20 years of work in this area and how you've applied it to clients. And I know a few of these stories, but I don't want to spoil it. So give us a couple success stories of people that have been open to what you teach and have adopted this for their own mindset, and how that's transformed their own careers, their athletics, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, I can give you one from life and one from sports. How's that?
Perfect. Love it.
So one from life is someone who's was abused as a child and grew up with a very low self-esteem, and had a husband that took advantage of that and met that identity, and the abuse continued, and affairs continued, and she stayed because that's the only way she knew how to survive, until one day she got home and he had left and taken everything. And didn't believe she was worth anything, or that she could find love, or that anybody would love her, understandably, based on what she went through. And
Right.
through this work on self-awareness and understanding the truth about her, and how much she matters, and how much she has been loved by life, even though it's come in a very different form.
Yeah.
She began to see more of the truth about herself, and began to love herself more, and opened herself up and found love. And right now, knock on wood, is living very happily ever after, remarried, and couldn't be happier with how her life is. But the work and the reflection on who she really is, and being able to go deep into that and hear and work on some of this, allowed her to do that. So that's one example from life.
So before you go to the sports story, how does a person like that have the wherewithal to even reach out for help? Because I know many people in those circumstances are similar, that the last thing they would do is pick up the phone and say, hey, can you coach me through this? Because
Right.
usually the self-esteem doesn't even allow them to do that. So how does a person get over the wounds to actually get the help they need?
Well, it's amazing how suffering will instigate the will.
Okay, there you go. Yeah,
And I think everybody has a break point.
there you go. Yeah,
So it just depends on the person.
perfect.
But there are a lot of people that are very stubborn, that live in a lot of pain for lifetimes,
40 years.
unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, and that's fear, and that's why it's so important to get this work, not my work, but with this work like this in general out, and educate people about it.
Absolutely.
The sports example, I mean, there's so many, but I mean, I could pick, a quarterback I worked with that had to start after the starter was injured, and he'd waited his whole life for this opportunity, and was going to play in his hometown, against the big rival USC. And, we worked on this idea, this one point about infinite possibility. That's the one thing we worked on all week, was that, and to never forget that, no matter what was going on in the game. And they were down by 3 touchdowns with 3 minutes and 53 seconds left in the game.
Game over, dude. Right? Nope.
One quick score. Defense got the ball back. Another quick score. And with 51 seconds left, they got the ball back again. Threw a pass over the middle. And with 14 seconds left, he threw a Hail Mary, which is now known as the Jail Mary in Arizona State University lore. And it goes down as one of the greatest plays ever in the university, where he won the game in his hometown, and his second start, and on one of the most incredible plays ever. But the work during the week was about preparing the mind to be ready for anything, meaning you could be up by 20 or you could be down by, but to never ever lose hope in what could happen every time that ball was snapped, to always keep that in you. And that one thing carried him through that game. So that's one sports example.
So good.
Yeah. There's one other comes to mind. An English LPGA player I worked with, who was very vocal about this in our work. Her name is Mel Reed. Very popular player, but she hadn't won. Talented up, the gills, but hadn't won yet. And we started working together, and she had lost her mom, unfortunately, about 6 years earlier to a car accident on the way to see her play.
Oh, no.
And yeah, it was a tough story. And again, she's been very vocal in the press about this, so it's nothing that I'm revealing that she hasn't talked about. And what we worked on was, this sort of hidden guilt and how to dissolve that, and how the guilt was a lie that was only holding her back from everything she wanted. And if her mother could talk to her, everything I'm sure her mother would tell her, there's no doubt in my mind about that she wanted. And so that little window of liberation allowed her to gain a little momentum in the coming month and a half. And she went into this one tournament and said to me, Howard, she said, I don't know, I just feel really ready this week. And she won by 2 shots and got her first LPGA victory. Yeah. So that was fun. But again, it was through the work of self-reflection to see the false nature of the guilt that was carrying, that was limiting her. So the ego was only serving the not worthy part.
Yes.
So it would get close and just not be able to pull it off, close and not be able to pull it off, so that truth could remain real. You're not worthy because of this. You're not worthy because of this. And as soon as worthy happened, the talent then changed to allow it to come out in the moments that mattered. And so anyway, so it's another important story about how life, it doesn't matter if it's an athlete or an individual, it's going to work the same way.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful stories. I love those. I like the real life examples, so people know it's not theory. This is actual life transformation going on here. It's so good. So we got about 9 minutes left here, Howard, and you mentioned before we went live about a foundation that can affect the school systems. This is important to me as a dad, right? Because as I told you before, I have 2 girls, 16 and 14. One's a junior in high school, the other one's a freshman. And we came out of COVID a few years ago, where they had been theoretically in school, but in their bedrooms, which was a fiasco on many levels. But when I started taking my older one back to school, now a freshman in high school, after about a week, she gets in the car after school one day and she says, Dad, can I ask you a question? I'm like, of course, always. And she says, Dad, I just don't get it. Why do I have to sit in a chair for 6-7 hours a day to hear teachers tell me information that I can find on my own in half an hour on my iPad or my phone? And I was like, dang, you're so brilliant, right? You ask me these questions. But I'm so happy. I'm proud of her. And I like that is a very valid question. And it really got my mind spinning. And I love where you're going with your foundation, because there was a time when the education system was, I call it filling the buckets with information, right? The kids come in and their buckets are empty, and the teachers put the information into the buckets. But information now is everywhere all the time. If you're connected to the internet, you can have the answer to your question by asking Siri or Alexis in seconds, right? And the answer may or may not be the right answer or a good answer, but you've got information everywhere. So it got me thinking, the education system was based on filling empty buckets with information, but now information is everywhere. So what do we do with these kids for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and the teachers themselves for that matter, that actually is going to be beneficial to the kids as they grow up and to society? So really the question for me is, what do the kids do with this information that they have access to that I didn't have as a kid? I do now, but I didn't have that when I was growing up. And is that even the right question to ask? But you've thought this through, Howard, and you're working towards a movement, right? So tell us about your foundation and your thoughts on education.
So that's a lot to take in. So I'm going to try and
Sure.
come back with an answer that sort of quantifies everything that you just said, which is very interesting.
If anybody can do it, you can. I believe in you.
We do what we know. And as a society around the globe, the structure has been, you go to preschool, grammar school, high school, you learn to integrate with other people, you get taught information that there was no means to get before this. And there's a structured discipline involved in it. There's gym class, there's different things that, I don't want to say it's glorified, it's not babysitting, because there's total education being done about life and the different subjects that you need. So society's done the best job it's known how to, by the obvious reality of it, right, of putting people through a system that hopefully when they are old enough to go into the working world or ready to go into the working world, they're rounded in enough to be able to survive and produce in society. Not produce maybe isn't the right word, to integrate with society in a way that is beneficial to the whole. that was the idea, right?
Sure.
It has changed dramatically with the internet, and there's a lot more homeschooling going on. There's a lot more disinformation going on. There's a lot of things that are happening that we could spend hours discussing when
And
it
we will.
relates to as it relates to education. But as it relates to what I'm trying to do with either the systems that are in place or the internet or whatever it is where people get awareness, one of the things I think is important, and I believe it's the next step in our evolution as a species, is in the expansion of mind and consciousness to a greater understanding of who we are. And I think the mental health crisis that we're faced with the last 5 to 7 years is epidemic level. It's not on the news every night. It's on the news from time to time, but it is epidemic level. The numbers of depression, anxiety, medication, suicides is off the charts right now. So it's an epidemic. I believe from my work with hundreds, if not thousands of young people, is that awareness and the proper teaching of awareness without an agenda, and this is where it gets really tricky, right? Because it's really tricky in this area, but with the pure intent to help them to be more empowered to live with self-respect, self-love, and self-appreciation. Because that will truly take care of everything.
Yeah.
It really is that simple. I don't know how else to say it.
Say it again. It's not important. Say it one more time, Howard.
To live with self-love, self-respect, and self-appreciation.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, then you're able to grace other people with that same value. And you're able to have an independent mind. And you're able to outgrow conditioning that creates suffering, potentially, from well-meaning people, teachers, religious leaders, political leaders, whatever it is, parents. But it helps you be more empowered and self-reliant. Not ignorant, but aware. Yeah. This is the system I'm in. How do I want to have an effect on it? How do I want to live through it? Based on this new love that I found for myself and respect. So that's the key. So what I want to do is take this teaching that empowers people with that and put it into a curriculum to help people. And I found the ripe age to be juniors and seniors in high school, whether they go to college or don't. Yeah. So I don't just want to go to college because there's millions that don't.
Right. So the stage of development you're talking about there, right? And identity.
Yeah, because I've dealt with a lot of 12, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, which has been great and wonderful. Yep. But they're still under that parental, I got to be careful with the terminology. Sometimes manipulation, sometimes energy, whatever it is, that can reverse a lot of this. Yeah. But at 17, 18, 16, 17, 18, the independent mind is opening. Yeah. And the self is coming out more. This is who I am and who I want to be. And I love you for your teachings and whatever, but I want, so that's just a ripe area to present this work. But in a class on self-discovery, self-awareness, so that they understand the impact of their energy and the way they're thinking on their choices, on their decisions, and how life is going to meet them. And I really want to empower millions of people across the globe, United States and across the globe, with this understanding. So the 8 Wisdom Foundations, the number 8wisdom.org is the site in the planning stages of getting this work out there. And this third book's going to be a big foundational pillar in that curriculum, to combine with these 2 pieces of work. And then basically it's going to be hitting the road and hopefully, but I feel like if there was ever a time in the history of school systems and administrators where they would be open to it, it's now, because there's crisis on their hands. They don't have enough people. They don't have enough counselors. Right. They have a lot of liability in terms of, what's going on with bullying and suicides. And so I'm hoping that it's a ripe time to present this.
Well, I'm thrilled for what you're doing. And I think it's absolutely critical for our kids, which is the next generation. That's our future, right? We're talking about our future. Now, you said 8 wisdom. I know you well enough. You chose the number 8 for a purpose. So why 8 wisdom, Howard?
Well, I'll give you a hint. The 8 is not being used as a number, but a symbol.
Yeah. Standing on top, upright instead of on its side, right?
Well, yes, it's right. It's in the Infinite Wisdom Foundation, but it's just expressed as the 8 Wisdom Foundation, but it's really the Infinite Wisdom Foundation, because that's what I feel this stream of awareness has come from. It's infinite wisdom from an infinite universe and an unconditionally loving universe and divinity. So
you just kind of toss that out there like as an aside. Infinite wisdom from the infinite God, unconditional love, that kind of stuff. I just gotta laugh. You just had a mouthful of life transforming truth. The infinite wisdom from the infinite God, and I'm like, that's so good. That's so good. I want to get to the point where I can just transform people by whatever just comes out of my mouth on the side.
Oh gosh.
So we're right at an hour, and I want to respect your time. I am so grateful, Howard, to know you, to see what you do. I know you have an impact on way more lives than any of us would ever know, and not just on their lives directly, but on then the lives that they impact, and the ripple effect. The butterfly effect is in full bloom here, and it's my hope and prayer and intention that the conversation that we've had can have that same effect. I don't even care if I get to find out who got affected by what. I would just hope that our words, created something in somebody's mind and heart that will help them turn that corner, right? That self-love and that self-respect and self-awareness will get them out of a rut, put them on a different trajectory. And sometimes the trajectory is just a little 1% change, but we all know in the long distance, a 1% change can put you to a completely different destination.
Exactly.
Right. Yep.
Well said. Very well said.
So kudos to you and your foundation, your book. So for those that missed the first part of this conversation, Howard, tell us again about the book you're working on and the books you've done, and then how people can connect with you offline.
Sure. HOWARDFALCO.com is where all the information is. I have TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, where I put out daily inspiration. First two books are I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are, and Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life, both available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And then the third book I'm working on right now, which I'm right in the middle of, is called Invincible, The Secrets of Self-Mastery, Next Level Mindfulness, and the Path to Inevitable Success. And success is however you determine that, whatever you're looking to achieve.
Yeah. My working definition of success at the moment is success is see if I can remember my own words. Success is a sustained series of small, simple steps in the direction of your desired destination. Success is a sustained series of small, simple steps in the direction of your desired destination.
Wow,
so
excellent.
As Robin Sharma would say, dream big, start small, act now, and then I always add, and don't quit. Right.
Exactly right. Yeah,
so,
well said.
I love you, Howard. I love what you're doing.
You too.
And
Thank you so much.
I look forward to opportunities to do this again. For everybody who tuned in, Cecilia Grace, Ron Perry, those that will see this after the fact, may you not just be entertained by what we said, but take it to heart and allow it to transform your life 1% at a time. Until next time, I'm Joseph MoJOE McCarthy, and that's Howard Falco at howardfalco.com, and we will meet again. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.